Do you believe that someone can be truly evil? Well, you might after hearing this story. There are people in the world capable of doing terrible things, but it isn't often we come across someone willing to commit acts so corrupt and cruel that their actions don't even sound real. This is the story of Rachel Burkheimer, the girl who watched the man she loved dig her grave before he took her life.
It was really senseless and it didn't need to happen, and it was just a horrible, horrible thing.
Rachel Rose Burkheimer was born on January 18, 1984, in Everett, Washington. She grew up with her parents, Bill and Denise, and her sister, Meghan. They all loved each other so much, and Rachel was the definition of perfect. She was always smiling, happy, and loved animals, aspiring to become a vet one day. While her childhood was happy for the most part, Rachel ran into some difficulties once she became a teen, and honestly, none of it was her fault. When she was in high school, Rachel lost not one, not two, but 6 of her friends. Can you imagine how awful that must have been? Being a teen is hard enough without having to go through so much loss. One friend took their own, another drowned, and another died in an accidental shooting. But the one that impacted Rachel the most was the passing of Corey Haynes, her best friend who tragically died in a car accident. Growing up, Rachel and Corey were totally inseparable, and they treated each other like brother and sister. Rachel's dad believes that they were soulmates, and he was just a really awesome person. With all this devastation in her life, Rachel's happy, smiley personality started to crumble, and she became a shadow of her former self. Unable to focus on the future anymore, her grades dropped. She started to go out partying a lot, doing things no one ever expected someone like her to do. Her family was seriously worried about her, and they were right to be. She dropped out of school and started hanging around with a group who calls themselves the Northwest Mafia, a small-time gang of mostly teens who dabbled in petty crimes and were constantly in and out of jail. Her parents only discovered just how deep Rachel was in this group when they got a phone bill of over $600 for calls Rachel made to a correctional facility in a nearby Shelton. Who the heck was their teenage daughter talking to in jail? The answer was a young man named John Anderson. John was one of the guys in this gang who was constantly in and out of jail for minor crimes, even enough to give him a reputation, but not enough to get him locked up for long. What became obvious quickly was that he was totally obsessed with Rachel, who only saw the good in him. When he got out of jail and started dating properly, things started going downhill real fast. Anytime they hung out, John would literally smell Rachel's clothes and hair to make sure she didn't smell like another guy. What a total creep, right? Before long, there were signs that things were more severe than just jealousy. Rachel was always turning up with weird bruises on her body, and her family got scared that John was hurting her. After a long talk with her sister about how toxic their relationship was, Rachel decided to break things off with John, much to the relief of her parents. While Meghan believed John was just an annoying loser, always getting into trouble, she didn't like how he treated her sister, and she was very supportive of her breaking up with him and encouraged Rachel to keep away from him for good.
When she left my room that night, I'll never forget, she closed the door, and for a split second, something went off in my head and it just said, but what if?
Pretty soon after, they started to see parts of the old Rachel emerging again, and she seemed happy and relaxed again. But it wouldn't last long. Around this time, she got close with one of the other guys in the gang, 18-year-old Maurice Rivas. Their relationship was never romantic, but they became really close friends after Rachel broke up with John. Maurice had a tough start in life, growing up living with his grandparents or in foster care. Like Rachel, he was sick and tired of wasting his life with the gang and wanted something different for himself. So they inspired each other to become better people. They both enrolled back in school to get their diplomas, and while things were starting to look up, Rachel had no idea she was actually in a lot of danger. After breaking up with John, she started seeing one of his close friends, which made John furious. On top of that, there was a rumor going around that Rachel was giving out gang secrets to her friends and members of rival gangs. While this has never been confirmed, the rumor was enough for the Northwest Mafia to hatch a plan against her. On the night of September 27th, 2002, Rachel went with Maurice to a party held by the Northwest Mafia. Even though she distanced herself from the gang, she wasn't worried about anyone being mean to her because she was with Maurice, who was still hanging out with them. Everything seemed totally normal, and they were having having a good time until John arrived. For some reason, when he got to the party and saw everyone was already having a great time without him, John got really mad. He started getting aggressive with a couple of the guys there, and things escalated until weapons were drawn. At this point, Rachel decided it was time to leave, and she tried to leave the house. Unfortunately, she never made it to the door. It turned out the whole night, inviting her to the party, John turning up and getting angry, was all a part of an elaborate plan to scare and hurt Rachel. As soon as she tried to leave, all the guys knocked her to the floor and started kicking her, including Maurice. Once she was basically unconscious, they tied her up and put her in the garage. It seems that that was as far as they planned, because after that, they couldn't decide what to do next. They thought about doing a lot of awful things to her, and when they couldn't decide, they just ordered pizza and played video games instead. It really shows how messed up these people were that they could just hang out like buddies after doing that to another person. And you know what, guys? That isn't even the worst part. The worst part is that she almost had the chance to escape this awful situation. Rachel could have been alive today. Trissa Connor, who co-leased the house with her then boyfriend, the alleged gang leader, was shocked when she came home to find Rachel tied up in her garage. Her first instinct was to help. She untied Rachel and tried to ask her what her name was and if she was okay. Unfortunately, the guys heard her come in. They entered the garage and made Trissa go into the house. Instead of going upstairs to call the cops and get help for Rachel, Trissa simply told the group to get Rachel out of her home. So that's what they did. They put Rachel into a gym bag and then put her in the trunk of one of their cars. Still not totally sure what they would do, they thought about getting a hotel room and keeping Rachel there until her injuries were healed. That wasn't what happened. The solution they settled on was far less merciful. 4 of the guys from the party, including John and Maurice, got in the car and started driving towards the mountains before stopping 30 miles away from town. They took Rachel out of the bag and left her with Maurice while they went to get supplies. Supplies for what, you ask? To dig a grave. What's so sad about this is that according to Maurice, by this point, Rachel had already accepted she wasn't going to survive the night. She told him she knew she was going to die and that she begged him that if that was the case, that she didn't want to be drowned. And even though he definitely had the chance to while everyone else was gone, Maurice never took the opportunity to try and free Rachel. It's crazy that at least 2 people had the opportunity to save this poor girl. When the others got back, they'd brought shovels. As they started digging, they made Rachel take all of her clothes and jewelry off, even a ring that she had gotten from a deceased friend that she begged to keep on. They refused. She knelt down in the grave and started praying. Then John started firing his weapon and didn't stop until he ran out of bullets. It took 10 days for her body to be discovered, and the police were concerned they'd never find out what happened. He knew that the gang was somehow involved, and because of that, people would be reluctant to give up information. However, one of the younger members confessed to his mom about what happened that night, and she told the cops everything. After they found Rachel, they discovered her clothes, jewelry, and shovel at the bottom of a pond. With all the evidence piling up, they started bringing people in for questioning, and eventually, they all turned in on each other. Rachel's family was heartbroken. They couldn't believe that their sweet, wonderful daughter had met such a violent end at the hands of a guy who claimed to love her. What hurt more was the fact that there were several opportunities to help her, but no one was brave enough to speak up against John. In the end, 8 people were convicted in Rachel's murder, including John and Maurice. Maurice was sentenced to 25 years and 10 months in prison after pleading guilty to first-degree homicide. His lawyer claimed that he was too afraid to speak up, and that's why he didn't help Rachel. The judge said that Maurice's fear was not comparable to the suffering Rachel endured that night, and Maurice knows he can never make up for what he'd done.
It was really senseless, and it didn't need to happen, and it was just a horrible, horrible thing.
John was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He has shown little regret for anything he did, other than the fact that he got caught. Apparently, before his arrest, he laughed about what he did to Rachel, even telling one friend, "You should have seen her head explode." According to Meghan, Rachel's sister, he even smirked and winked at her family during the trial. Can you believe how disgusting this guy is? Despite appealing his sentence, John and the others are behind bars to this day and are unlikely to get out anytime soon. Can you guys imagine how hard this must have been on Rachel's family to suffer losing her and then have to listen to the details of that night in 8 separate trials? It must have been totally traumatizing. Even with all the pain they've been made to endure, Rachel's family decided to do something positive with the new platform they had. Rachel's dad, Bill, began working to create new laws around helping injured people. He wanted to illegalize refusing care to someone who is visibly injured. If that law had been in place on the night Rachel died, she probably would have been alive today. He also spoke at the 2007 National Day of Remembrance for Murder Victims, declaring it a day where victims' families could be free to heal, comfort one another, and try to find peace. This day shall be a day of grief relief. All survivors get a one-day pass on pain, and no monsters can whisper in their ears. Rest in peace, Rachel Burkheimer. What do you guys think of this case? Would you try and save someone in Rachel's situation? Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below.